Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode 313 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the dreaded palindrome. The Second Amendment podcast has a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd Beard with me tonight. She is the greatest hostess in the entire world. I couldn't do this without her. Erin Collette. How you doing, Erin?
So first of all, shout out to the patrons. Episode 313 is dropping on Friday the 13th. Yay, spooky season.
Ooh, I did not realize. We never. You did the rare thing of look ahead to see when the show is dropping. So
it's only because my mother has a doctor's appointment on Friday, and I know that it's Friday the 13th.
I haven't paid attention. That makes me even happier because I was telling my daughter because it was like one of the first Friday the 13th she was aware of. And I told her, I said, I have always been on the lookout for what kind of a day Friday the 13th is going to be. And I have always remembered, like, at the end of the day, that was a pretty good day. And that almost ended when I was taking my daughter up to drop her off to do the parent exchange thing in New Hampshire, and got out, went, man, somebody's burning their brakes, and looked down at my car and the rear wheels are smoking. And for what I thought was going to be a quick turnaround and I was going to have a bunch of free time at home, instead involved me, waiting for a tow truck to come and take my car from New Hampshire back to Massachusetts for multiple hundreds of dollars and all of that. And meanwhile, the tow truck driver, which, by the way, I don't think there is a tow truck driver on this planet that is not unbelievably cool. Like, I have never met one that wasn't like just someone completely full of great stories and more than happy to tell you. And yeah, I rode with a guy named Jason. He thought that was pretty funny that you're riding with Jason on Friday the 13th. And and he took me all the way to Massachusetts, and he was smoking Lucky Strikes the whole way. And I'm just like, oh man. Smelling those that used to be one of my brands, and luckily I'm like, as I'm driving, I'm like, I could totally bum one from him, and I'm gonna smell like smoke no matter what. So when I get home, my wife's gonna smell smoke on me, and she's gonna be like, why do you smell like cigarettes? Oh, because the tow truck driver, he asked if we could smoke, and I'm like, absolutely, you can smoke. Don't not smoke because of me. And all that. And I resisted, and I realized I'm officially quit smoking. I totally could have gotten away with it, and it was Lucky Strikes. They were filtered. They were Lucky Strikes filtered. I preferred the unfilters. God. So yeah, that is good stuff. Right at the 13th. So hooray for patrons on the 313 on Friday the 13th. So I will on the spooky angle. I will just say that me and the family went out and we saw Beetlejuice in the theaters, and I laughed my ass off. It was hilarious.
Okay, good.
I will say, without any spoilers, obviously, if you're a fan of the original movie, Harry Belafonte's Banana Boat song is a key character in the movie. In this case, it was Richard Harris's MacArthur Park. And I will leave the entire context out of it entirely. But, oh my God, MacArthur Park in a Beetlejuice movie. I was roaring. It was hilarious. So I highly recommend it. That the cast was out of this world. Most of the Beetlejuice cast, minus Gina Davis and Alec Baldwin, were not there, probably for obvious reasons. And Jeffrey.
Well, I know why Alec Baldwin wasn't. Why wasn't Gina Davis?
I just assume that it was just you couldn't really have one without the other, in theory.
Oh, fair enough.
And all that. And also, we were actually talking about it the other night. David and I were talking about it, and I looked up current pictures of Gina Davis, and I'm like, Hollywood makeup could make her look like that she hasn't aged a day in the last 30 years. But Alec Baldwin, Not so much. The booze and hard living has aged him quite nicely.
Yeah, he's put on a lot of weight in the face.
Yeah, and then but there was that, and of course Jeffrey Jones, because of his certain legal issues, he's on the federal sex offender registry. I'll just leave it at that. Could not be there, but his character was in the movie, and I'll just leave it at that. Not being played by Jeffrey Jones. It was a very, very interesting artistic take. It was not as good as there's two very recent movies that are like 30 plus year sequels. Actually, well, the Axel F, I think, was only like 20 some years. That was the late 90s. No, that was 30 years. It was 30 years. And then
I just looked it up right now because I wondered how many years it had been, and Beetlejuice 1 came out in 1988, so that's 36 years. Mm-hmm. That's a long time between sequels. I mean, prior to that, I think the longest was like the one between Incredibles 1 and 2.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you've also got Top Gun and Top Gun Maverick, and Top Gun Maverick is, in my opinion, a perfect film. Oh my God. They did such a good job with that never seen a Top Gun movie. You can watch it and you'll enjoy the hell out of it. But if you're a fan of the original, yeah, it'll be, you'll enjoy that one. And the, Beverly Hills Cop Axel F was marvelous. Oh my God. Was that good? I think that may actually be my second favorite Beverly Hills Cop movie, only because the first is just too perfect in its own light. But I liked it better than the second one, and I liked the second one an awful lot. And I liked it better than the third one because I've seen the third one. It was good. Also, he's one of those Monica Bellucci's in it, and Monica Bellucci being in anything is just incredible. Yeah, it was good. It was really, really good. I highly recommend it.
Okay. Yeah, I never got around to seeing Maverick. I probably should fix that.
Yeah, you should actually. It is quite good. I think you will be impressed at how good it is because, I mean, Top Gun was very much a popcorn movie and just a naval aviator recruiting poster. And we all know that military recruiters are notorious liars. And the idea of 30 plus year later sequel with all the original cast is I don't know if that's such a good idea. And it seems like such a bad idea, and it came out so marvelous.
I mean, it didn't have all of the cast.
That is true.
But I take your meaning. I'm just being pedantic at this point.
Oh yeah. I mean, there is a photograph of Goose. And there is,
I mean, that much was obvious because he died, but I was actually thinking about Iceman.
Oh, no, Val Kilmer was in it.
Really?
Yes, Val Kilmer was in Top Gun Maverick.
Okay. I mean, I just figured because of Val Kilmer's, doesn't he have throat cancer or something like that?
I forget what but he does have a tracheotomy, and he does not have a voice. They actually used, I think they said AI. They actually recorded they created an aged version of Val Kilmer's voice so that he could speak some lines in the movie.
Oh, cool. Okay.
But he is just as Maverick is aging. Iceman is also aging, and not as well.
Okay. I really don't want to get into these topics. I really don't.
All right.
Last week was awful.
Shall we just peel off the Band-Aid?
I mean, we can talk about 80s sequel movies for their next hour. I'm fine with that.
I mean, that would be amusing. I don't know are there any other 80s sequel movies you could think of?
Oh God, no, not at the moment.
I can't either. I was trying to think. I could have sworn there was a third, 30 year plus sequel movie that came out recently, but I couldn't put my finger on it. So Axel F and Top Gun Maverick, and then Beetlejuice. But either way, it was good, and also Michael Keaton in the makeup, just timeless.
I guess you could consider like the okay, I don't think the 2016 Ghostbusters, because that was a reboot. But then, like, wasn't there
no
the one after that, like Ghostbusters Afterlife?
Yeah,
or something?
Ghostbusters Afterlife was a 30-year sequel. That is correct, and it was definitely a direct sequel.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, that one was spectacular. And actually, I watched the Frozen Empire, and that one was not as good as Afterlife in my opinion, but that's damning with faint praise. It was still pretty good.
Mm-hmm. I think Mad Max Fury Road was also a sequel, because like the last Mad Max movie prior to that was, I think, Thunderdome.
Yep. Yeah, and Thunderdome was, I think, the early 90s.
No, I don't think
was
so.
It late
I could
80s?
be wrong, but I want to say mid to late 80s.
Beyond Thunderdome, 85.
1985.
Yep. Good call, Aaron.
Yep.
Yep. But yeah. So yeah, and
we aren't going to mention. I mean, I am mentioning, but Blade Runner 2049. I mean, it wasn't very good. So
I will openly say I want to like Blade Runner so bad. I mean, obviously, Alien is my the Alien franchise is my sci-fi genre, though not anymore, unfortunately, because I have. Mm-hmm. They got bad. They got real bad, and so I'm done letting them hurt me. But it's one of those. It's Ridley Scott. It's got that dark thing. It stars Harrison Ford, and it's all that. And I have watched like every single there's 3 or 4 different cuts out there. I've watched every single one of them. I bought a copy of Do Androids Dream of Electronic Sheep and read it, and I hate
Electric.
That book, I don't mind Philip K. Dick. I kind of enjoy the writing of Philip K. Dick. Not Do Androids Dream of Electronic Sheep. I despise that book.
Electric Sheep.
Electric Sheep, yes. And so I cannot like Blade Runner. And then I was on a plane, and that was one of the movies that was available to watch, and I started watching the Ryan Gosling Blade Runner sequel, 20 whatever the heck it is. And when Harrison Ford showed up, and I realized, oh yeah, he's just here because they asked him really nicely. Okay, I'm done. I just turned it off. I don't know how it ends. I don't care. But yeah.
I'm at this point, I'm just grasping at straws. It's like, well, hey, what about the last 2 Indiana Jones movies?
My old boss was a huge Indiana Jones fan, and she called us into it for a meeting, and we sat down, and she said, so just so you know, Kingdom of the Crystal Skulls comes out on Friday. If you guys want, we can all do a off-site meeting. And me and there was just 2 of us under her, so it wasn't a huge meeting. We 2 of us both looked at each other, and then we looked at her and said, "No, we'd rather work."
Damn.
I'm trying to remember if she took the day off.
Good for her.
But I think she did come back from that and go, "Yeah, you guys made the right call." Nuking the fridge, the new version of jumping the shark.
All right, I don't want to do this, but
we'll go through it quick because one, there isn't that much to talk about, and that's really what I want to talk about. And 2, it's early on, and so therefore we are still in the bubble of uncertainty, and there'll be more information out there. But we're ACP, we talk about Second Amendment news, and mass shootings are Second Amendment news. So the first point of order that I want to say is something we've been talking about for a while, which is the Tennessee Star finally released the manifesto left by the Covenant school killer. And and I went through it this morning. I didn't really I've had it, just hadn't had a chance to read it and really been committed to it. Finally, it was like now or never. Read through the whole thing, more or less. Some of the pages are like really, really jumbled word salad, and I found it very, very difficult to physically read, and I didn't really see the need to commit to it that much. And overall, I did not find much that is useful. There's a link in the show note where you can follow the Tennessee Star, and they'll essentially, you write in your email and they email you the PDF. and all that. If you don't trust that, you can email me at weirdbeard@gmail.com. I'll email you my PDF and you can have a look at it, but it's not great. The only thing, and I hinted at it in the in some of the earlier ones, and I didn't want to directly say anything because again, I didn't know, but at the same time, I also didn't want to commit in the other direction. There was some question. I had seen some unconfirmed images that led to the suggestion that possibly the shooter had transitioned from they were born female, they were trans male, and then possibly they were trying to convert back, and that might have been a motivation going on there. And I saw no such evidence in this. It seems like this person was very much identifying as a trans man and was very committed to that identity, at least throughout the entirety of this journal that led all the way up to the day they died. So
which makes the sign off to their friend where they used both names even stranger.
Yeah, they continue in several instances. They sign off on pages on the journal with both their male and female name, which again is very, very strange. I have yet to meet a trans or non-binary person who does that. It's dead name. It is beyond the pale to do that. And so it makes people even uncomfortable to talk about them before they transitioned in the name that they were using at the time that they transitioned. Such as Caitlyn Jenner being the greatest example. Is they won Olympic medals as a male, but they have transitioned. And do you say that Caitlyn Jenner won the medals? It wasn't a Caitlyn Jenner there at the time. Maybe it was a Caitlyn Jenner, and either way.
Well, I mean, as another example, you've got Elliot Page, who pre-transition not only was an actress, but I believe the first breakout role, could be wrong, but was Juno, a movie about being a teenage mother. And so that's one of those things where it's like, okay, I want to be respectful, but the gender of the character you're playing is absolutely essential to the plot of the movie. And it's going to be really weird to be referring to, Elliot Page playing a pregnant woman. And it's one of those, it's an edge case, but it is really awkward. So I get where you're coming from. And so, I mean, I obviously can't speak for the entire trans community, nor would I want to, but I think a certain amount of grace can be extended for people who were very active in the public eye pre-transition, as long as you make a very specific, before and after. That people may come at me for this, I don't know, but there are times when it is important to make that distinction.
Yeah. But either way, and then one other thing, we were talking just briefly about this before we started the show, and you were asking, you had seen, and I actually did a quick search on this subject matter just to see if there was anything I had missed, and I found exactly what you were talking about, which was the news media began talking very, very heavily when it was realized that it was a trans man who had shot up this school. Was possibly this person was undergoing testosterone therapy to do gender conforming therapy, and that may have made them violent. And given the amount of stuff that they were talking about, their gender issues and all of that, I would imagine that if they were on hormone therapy, that would have been mentioned in there. And unless it was tucked in a corner somewhere, which would seem very out of character from how everything else was written in there, that was not something that was happening. I think the key, and even There were some, racial stuff written in there. There was some, there was, some anti-religious and classist stuff that was written in there. But honestly speaking, the overall theme of this was this person was really in full mental crisis. And I think that's the big takeaway. A lot of people are talking about this or that or another thing about this person's motivation and how it colors their political views one way or the other. And I don't think any of those are justified from my reading of this. I think that this is very similar to pretty much all the other manifestos that I've read, and that this was a person that was extremely sick and in extreme need of severe mental health intervention, and that was not available to them, or at least not given to them. And that's a major problem with our society right now, is that it's very, very difficult for people who are in crisis and need help, who are actively looking for help, to get the help they need. The people who may not even know that they need help but are becoming a danger to themselves or others. And this person was definitely making suicidal ideations constantly and fully planned to die during this. There was never an intention to surrender during this shooting. Another factor that I had heard and going through, there was no statement whatsoever about gun control being a motivation either. There was some talk that the shooter picked a braced AR pistol as their weapon because what I specifically heard was they were inspired by the Washington Post series on the AR-15 that they won a Pulitzer on, that we talked about on this show.
I remember that.
Yeah, saw no reference to that anywhere in here either. So could very well be, but overall, I didn't see it. And again, even if there was a brief reference to stuff, they mentioned disliking rich people and disliking Christians. Maybe that's how they felt, but there was so much just crazy talk in there that I don't think they were in touch with reality. And so I'm not going to really read too much into it. And I'm going to urge everyone out there who wants to talk about this and wants to reflect on this to really lean into the mental health angle, and that this person definitely needed to see somebody and get the help that they need, therapy they need, possibly a diagnosis of something that was unknown at that moment because it wasn't manifesting itself in such a horrible way that led to this.
The thing that I'm braced for, because I know it's going to happen, somebody is going to say something like, they're either going to say that they were in mental crisis because they were trans, or the mental crisis caused them to be trans. And, trans people come in all sorts of shapes and sizes and mental conditions. I know that there's this tendency to label us as crazy. I'm going to very briefly climb up onto a soapbox here, and I'm going to mention something known as survivorship bias. And here's a perfect example. I know that you've all seen the thing on Facebook about the World War II plane with bullet holes and what they armored, but here's another one that I think is a little bit closer to home. In World War I, for the very first time, the United States started using helmets rather than cloth caps. And the military started seeing an increase in head injuries. And the initial thought was that these newfangled helmets were somehow causing injuries to the soldiers, until it was pointed out that if it were not for the helmets, the injuries would have been fatalities. Another example is why we're seeing so many diagnoses of cancer. It's that cancer is the big thing that kills you. The reason that we're seeing more people dying of cancer isn't, I believe, because of a massive increase of carcinogens or radiation or other things like that in the environment. It's because medically we have done so well to get rid of all of the other causes of death that it appears that cancer is worse than it is. And it is bad, please don't get me wrong. But, the people who are suddenly dying from cancer might have died from polio or congestive heart failure or any number of other things. And so that ties into this. There is this belief that, okay, we're seeing some trans people commit violence, therefore, they are nuts. And I just want to bring up survivorship bias. Think of all the normal trans people who haven't committed violence, and you haven't heard of them because they are following the law and not hurting people, and therefore not becoming sensationalist clickbait. So just please keep that in mind. Thank you.
No, that is a absolutely great point on the fact that, these are outliers. We talk about it from the other angle of we need to be mindful of these spree killers because it is awful and horrible. And if we can do anything to stop this, then that is absolutely what we need to do. But at the same time, the idea that has, the media and the anti-gun groups, but I repeat myself, try to make the impression that there are school shootings and spree killings happening constantly throughout the country every single day and all that. It's just not true. It's street violence that is the daily violence that happens in America and really around the world. And these are just very, very rare instances, just the same way as the people that are getting killed in car accidents, not in planes crashing. Even when you have these stories of Boeing planes having doors fall off and stuff like that, air travel is the safer alternative travel. Really quickly, as a quick aside, Aaron, you mentioned the cancer angle. That's as we're curing more diseases and all of that, your skin is getting exposed to UV radiation. If you don't have a dermatologist, and especially if you've got some gray in your hair, you should definitely get one, because on a long enough timeline, we're all getting skin cancer. And so that's a thing that's going to happen again. As you know, cancer is just something that pops up on a long enough timeline. You mentioned all the trans people that are not violent and are not causing problems. I will also note one thing that frequently gets talked about in these shooters, which there is a correlation, though I don't think it's quite what the people think, is SSRI antidepressants. These drugs are all stated that, all of these killers have been on these. And I don't know how many of them are confirmed or not confirmed. Quite a few of them have been confirmed, but there are quite a few that are speculative as well on some of the lists that I've seen. But think about all the people that you know, and you know a lot of people that are on SSRI medication, and because of that, they are functional, and they really would not be doing well without it, and they are not violent. And I will speculate that the issue is not with the medication, but is with misdiagnoses that are very, very earnest and natural. That people that have more severe mental illness, as many of these people appear to have, may only be complaining and talking to the doctor about the depressive angles of their illness, and therefore leading them to believe that they have major depressive disorder and SSRIs are the correct medication, which they very well may not be.
Because if you're manic, you may very well enjoy it, because I'm getting stuff done.
Yes, yeah, manic phases. Yeah, talk to anybody who has bipolar and ask them what their manic phases feel like. Almost all of them will say it feels amazing and that they love it to death. But they may not love it to death because they end up harming themselves in a multitude of ways because of their lack of judgment. But yeah, so again, be very, very cautious with the political saws that can exist here, because I think the key factor is just that we are not getting people the mental health the care that they need. You mentioned also, people saying, transgender people are all crazy. Short answer is, if you want to dig however you want to dig, we're all crazy. I got attention deficit disorder and probably NVLD. Guess what? I'm crazy too. I identify as a cis male, and everybody else has got depression and bipolar, and like everyone's got something, dyslexia, whatever. We're all neurodivergent in one way or the other. And there's very few people that have a clean slate, and maybe if they do have a clean slate, they haven't been looked at enough. So I don't think that
an absolutely normal person would be terrifyingly deviant to us.
Yes. Yeah, they'd be hyper rare.
Well, I don't just mean the rarity, although that's true. It would just be, they would seem so weird to us. Mm-hmm. Like, worse than the stereotypical Vulcan. It's just, what's wrong with you? You're not behaving you're not behaving irrationally like the rest of us.
Yeah, that is true. All right, well, shall we move to the next one, and then we can move on?
Yeah, I mean, speaking of irrationality and undiagnosed mental problems, and geez. Yeah, so the Georgia high school shooting, I'll chime in later. I cannot lead into this.
Yeah, so this was I believe he was 13.
14, I think.
14. Yeah, 14-year-old male walked into Appalachia High School in Georgia, and with an AR-15, and shot a bunch of people, killed 4. Mm-hmm. And then was apprehended by the police. So the killer is still alive and facing charges. And it does sound like the school had lockdown procedures, and those worked. He was in class, I believe, at the time before he started shooting. I don't know where the rifle was and how he had brought it into school and concealed it or whatever, but that does appear to be from some of the stories I've read. Again, we are very, very early into this into this story, so not all the facts are known yet. And since there is a pending trial, we will see what ends up happening with this, especially since we have seen that the shooter in Aurora, Colorado, also survived and was tried. I'm trying to remember, has the Parkland shooter been tried yet as well?
I mean, I haven't heard anything about it on the news, and you'd think living in Florida there would be a big circus about it, so I'm going to assume not.
Yeah, but also it may be very similar to the Aurora shooter, in the fact that essentially they went before the judge and their legal team pointed out this person is severely mentally ill, and so the Aurora shooter will hopefully spend the rest of their days in a mental institution. That's where they are right now, incarcerated in a mental hospital where they are being treated for their illness. And I would feel a little upset if they ended up getting released, just because I don't know how much therapy can fix a person that broken. So we will see if anything actually comes out from the shooter. But one thing that I think we may actually get a lot of information from, and this is kind of unique to this instance, is the shooter's father was also charged with murder for essentially supplying the rifle. And here's where we get kind of into the storyland on the story time for the events, is that... Yeah.
So hang on. I've got some things to say about this, but also I've got to correct myself. The Parkland shooter has had a trial, and he pled guilty to all charges. So really the only trial was about whether or not he's going to get the death penalty. But it happened during COVID. And so that's what everyone was thinking about. And so he pled guilty in 2021. They had the death penalty trial in 22. And he has been sentenced to life without the possibility of parole.
Okay.
So I mean, the only thing I can say is we all were obsessed with COVID, and it was hard to hear anything else. So that's what happened there. Yeah. So about this kid. So first of all, nothing I'm going to say excuses him. He went and he murdered people, and he intended to murder a lot more, and he's scum, and he's actually not going to get the death penalty because he's under 18 and he can't. There's a law that says that people under 18 can't get the death penalty in Georgia. Personally, I think I would be okay with it. But what I'm saying is, all that I have read about this kid and his family life, no one was coming out of that environment unscathed. Again, doesn't excuse his actions, but I can understand how he got messed up. Very briefly here, his parents are divorced. His mother is a drug addict. She was on all sorts of things, including fentanyl and some other drugs, which I can't remember right at the moment. But yeah, so she's got her problems. Then the father who he was living with was a complete jerk. He was not physically abusive, but he was verbally and likely mentally abusive to the boy. And that's one reason why the parents broke up. And so, he would yell and rave and probably tried to hold his son to very toxic standards of masculinity. There's more. I don't want to dwell on this, but what I'm saying is this kid was kind of doomed for the start. And if he had gotten help, then it might not have turned out this badly. So, but getting to what happened here. So this kid, like in 2023, he was on Discord and was talking about shooting up schools, and his Discord name was a Russian translation of the Sandy Hook murderer. So, a little bit of a hint there, and the police came and had a visit. Now, the police, while they had a very strong suspicion that it was him, they couldn't prove anything. And so they had to sit down with him and his father and explain what was going on. And of course, the kid said he didn't say that and he would never do those things. His account must have been hacked. And the father, who is, he's into guns. This is a Second Amendment podcast. We don't cast shade on that. He was an avid hunter. But the police made a note. They specifically told the father, does your son have access to firearms? And the father told them no, and that all of the guns in the house were locked up in his safe, and his son didn't have any access to them. And at that point, look, I love to dump on law enforcement that doesn't do their job. It didn't seem like there was anything else they could really do. And the father said, the guns were locked up, and this, at the time, 13-year-old boy didn't have access to them. You've got the presumption of innocence here. Mm-hmm. And so, okay. Then, in December, his father bought him an AR-15, which just by itself isn't specifically bad. I would give side-eye at buying a gun for a kid where the police suspect that you're making death threats about shooting up schools, but okay, given the benefit of the doubt, the father, wanted to think good of his son. Okay. But the problem that I have here, and we haven't yet heard how the son got the rifle, but it was definitely negligence on the father's part, because either he let the son have constructive possession of the rifle, which is bad, because, I believe at 14 years old, can you legally possess a firearm? I know that you can't buy it, but if it's given to you as a gift, can you legally possess it, Weer'd?
Federally, there's no law. It directly depends on your state.
Okay.
In some states, actually, I'm trying to remember if there's any. There may be some states where it would be legal for you to possess it without direct adult supervision. But
okay.
But that's
but still, given the conversation with the police, he should have kept it locked up in the safe and only allowed his son to use the AR-15 under adult supervision until he became a legal adult. The other option is that the father didn't have the rifle secured. He had been keeping it in the safe, but he had left the gun out of the safe for some reason, or forgot to lock it, or the son somehow gained access to the keys or the combination or whatever. Either way, the father facilitated this through negligence. And that's why the father has been arrested as... I don't know if he's been arrested specifically as an accessory, but he has been arrested for the deaths of these children. I believe it's second-degree murder as opposed to the son that's facing first-degree murder.
Correct.
But still, this was not good and responsible firearms ownership and stewardship. And that's the one thing that we really harp on in this podcast. You have a right to keep and bear arms as an American, but you have then a responsibility with that right, and that responsibility is to secure your weapons and make sure that they aren't misused and to use them properly, and the father didn't do that. And so, in this particular instance, I'm okay with the father being arrested. So, yeah, that's the situation as I see it. Did I miss anything important, Weer'd?
No, that's very much what I was getting at. Is I remember when the news first got released that he was getting arrested. A friend of mine sent me that news story and was like, "Uh-oh, we're all screwed. Somebody that kill someone or buy somebody a gun, or actually the one they said was buy your kid a car on their 16th birthday, and they get drunk and run somebody over. Congratulations, you're in the dock." And that is not this instance, unless the child had a habitual drinking or drug habit, and then you're giving them unfettered access to a motor vehicle, in which case, yeah, you kind of are. And so that appears to be the crux, and we will see exactly where it goes, because this is only the second time that this has been done. The first time being the shooter in Michigan, I forgot which town it was, who was given a handgun for their birthday, and then they brought it to school, and they were given unfettered access, and I believe his parents were convicted, but I'm not sure. They also were fugitives, which is always a good look. You want to appear innocent. Definitely run away and don't.
I don't recall unfettered access, because I remember us talking about it. It wasn't that long ago, and I think in this particular case, the gun had been kept in the safe, but it was like the mother thought the father was going to take care of it, and the father wanted to clean the gun before he put it away, and just didn't get around to it. And so because they didn't immediately secure it, the son then got it. That's what I recall.
Okay. Well, I'm not going to go back and look right now, but it is not important. The important factor is the why. And the why is, if, somebody is known to you to be violent, in mental health crisis, in need of help, is losing touch with reality, giving them or suicidal. Do not give them access to a firearm. This is actually where the Hold My Guns mission is really, really shines on if you don't have somebody that you can go and drop off firearms to and just say, here, hold on to these for a little while until I get through this. Or somebody comes in and says, you're going down a bad path here. Let's get these guns out of the house right now until we're out of this woods. That's absolutely the correct thing to do, because guess what? If you're, we don't do the thing of a gun in the home is far more dangerous for you. But if you're dangerous for you, then having a gun is not doing you any favors. And so, yeah, this is, again, we'll see with the trial, because there's a lot of uncharted grounds here, and there's a lot we still don't know. But I am very, very interested to see where this trial goes, and I don't have very much problem with it.
Mm-hmm. Really, the thing that surprises me most is that the shooter surrendered to police, and I thought he was going to go out in a blaze of glory.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, especially, one of his messages, I can't kill myself yet because I'm not contributing anything to culture. And, his belief is that he contributes to society by murdering people. That's the kind of ego which, look, I'm not a psychologist, but I would just think, when you make yourself that much the center of the universe, then surrendering and going to prison, you're no longer the hero of the movie. It makes more sense to go out in a blaze of glory, and so that surprised me.
Yeah, and that's all I really want to talk about this one, unless you got anything else to add.
Not at this time.
Right,
I mean, there are things which can be said, but it's all speculation, and I don't know how relevant it is.
Mm-hmm.
We'll find out more during the trial, as you say.
Yes. All right, on to, this is kind of bittersweet news, but we'll upgrade it to good news, is that the Ninth Circuit has ruled on this case. What is the Calero v. Bonta, and that's the challenge to California public carry bans, and it went two ways. There were certain things that were where it was illegal to carry a firearm, and now the court is saying that no, these are areas where carry should and absolutely be legal, and in the case of in this one, in Hawaii, Hawaii was ruled that banks you could not carry in, and that is now legal. Parking lots adjacent to banks, and parking lots shared by government buildings and non-government buildings. So So
it sounds like government or parking lots for just government buildings are still off limits.
Yeah, it does. That may be the case.
Okay.
And in California, hospitals and medical facilities, public transit, which again, we talked about this before, and that's a big deal.
That's a biggie.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And gatherings that require a permit. So if you were in any sort of gathering that you needed a permit to have, that was illegal for you to carry in that. Places of worship, and financial institutions, and parking areas that are similar.
Mm-hmm.
And let's see, the ones that they have still enacted. These places have what they call the vampire law, which means that you need to expressly welcome in carry permits, people carrying on that, which is kind of a major sticking point and something that's being challenged.
So you seem like you're flailing. Let me rescue you from drowning here. Okay. So yeah, the vampire rule is the one where before you go in, you basically have to say, "Hi, can I come in? I'm carrying a gun."
Or look for a sign.
Well, that's why it's called the vampire rule. You have to specifically be allowed in. Anyway, the court said that Hawaii couldn't do it, but the court said that California could. And the big difference here is because California allows putting up the sign. The sign that says you can't, no weapons on premises, you can't enter. Whereas Hawaii didn't have any sort of sign language, and that would require the person to get permission in order to enter lawfully. Or, like most people, would just be, I don't want to make this weird, and if I tell someone who works at the store that I'm carrying a gun, they could see that as a threat and call the police. So, I either won't go there or I will just say concealed is concealed. But I want to point out the difference between the two. They upheld the injunction, meaning that Hawaii's vampire rule was not enforceable. But they allowed California's to be enforced because California had a sign. That's really the difference there. Okay.
And I actually found, and I've added it to the show notes, the other places that were not repealed is carries in bars and restaurants that serve alcohol, which again I found super ironic because that's really the one place that a lot of places are getting their laws repealed on, because essentially just saying, look, just because they serve alcohol here, we're saying don't get drunk, and getting drunk while carrying is expressly illegal in most places. So that doesn't make a ton of sense. And then playgrounds, parks, state parks, casinos, stadiums and arenas, libraries, zoos, museums, and parking areas attached to those areas. So, I mean, the parking area one is big because, again, if you're going to the zoo, all right, it's one thing to say whether or not you can carry in a zoo, which is kind of dumb. And I actually make it a point whenever I'm at the zoo to carry at the zoo because there are large animals that are very dangerous at zoos. There's not a high chance of one of them escaping, but I'm closer to a lion than I generally am most of the time. So I might as well carry something that, at least in theory, will change a lion's mind. But if you're going to the zoo, even if you agree not to carry there, you have to be unarmed when you get to the zoo because there's not going to be any place for you to disarm and leave your firearm in the vehicle. So yeah, it's some step in the right direction. And again, I always say we need to adopt the playbook of the anti-gunners on this, that any step in the right direction is a good step. And so we should embrace that and not get too disheartened by that other stuff. But again, we can challenge that other stuff later.
Mm-hmm. Your voice sounds scratchy as hell, Weer'd. Do you need to get a drink?
Yeah, I just took a nice sip of tea, but yeah, no, it's been scratchy the last couple of days. I don't know what's going on.
Okay.
But hey, you know what? We can let somebody else talk now. Because last week I reported on Massachusetts Supreme Court overturning the state's ban on automatic knives. So I asked Oddball, our resident blade expert, to make some suggestions on what I might get for my first switchblade.
Welcome to Oddball's Corner Pocket. Recently, the Massachusetts Supreme Court struck down their law banning switchblade knives with a blade greater than 1.5 inches. Using the guidelines given in the NYSERPA versus Bruin decision. Of course, this means that Weer'd immediately wants one and has asked me for some assistance in choosing one. So let's get into it. First, let's go over the case a little. The case in question is Commonwealth versus David E. Kanjura. David Kanjura was arrested by the Boston PD for assault and battery of his girlfriend. While being detained, he was found to be in possession of an assisted opening novelty knife with a blade of over 1.5 inches, which, according to Massachusetts law, apparently falls under the definition of switchblade. Seriously, I was unable to find a picture of the offending object, but court documents describe it as, quote, an orange firearm-shaped knife with a spring-assisted blade, unquote. This is the description of the kind of blade that can only be found in your finest mall ninja emporium, if you ask me. Incidentally, while I was unable to find a picture of the actual knife, I think I found a prime example of what it might be. Link in the show notes. You'll notice that I sounded a bit confused that a spring-assisted knife counts as a switchblade in the state of Massachusetts. Let me back up a little bit. Most states that have banned switchblades just use the same definition of switchblade that the federal government uses in U.S. Code Title 15, Section 1241. It defines switchblades as any knife that opens by hand pressure applied to a button or other device in the handle of the knife, or any knife having a blade that opens automatically by operation of inertia, gravity, or both. So, hitting a button or lever to deploy the knife is evil, but a knife that requires the user to start deploying the knife manually before a spring kicks in and assists, causing the blade to snap open, is kosher. Of course, this definition also includes so-called gravity knives that can be flicked open or dropped open as the user holds down a button or lever, but that's a different rant. Massachusetts, of course, has to be different. Massachusetts law, Part 4, Title 1, Chapter 269, Section 10, Paragraph B, lists prohibited weapons outside of firearms. When it comes to the relevant part, it simply states, quote, a switch knife or any knife having an automatic spring release device by which the blade is released from the handle, having a blade of over 1.5 inches, unquote. The state courts have determined this to include assisted knives in the definition of switchblades. Incidentally, it also bans folks from carrying the usual martial arts weapons that restrictive states love to ban, plus things like daggers, stilettos by name, any double-edged blade, blowguns, and, spiked armbands? I'll include a link in the show notes, but I will warn you that my eyes rolled in the back of my head on several occasions in hopes of saving my sanity while I attempted to read this 400-word list of random evil objects with punctuation randomly thrown in. Anyways, back to the case. Mr. Kanjura was arrested for being a bad person, and the cops found him with an evil-assisted knife. He instantly argued that he had the right to carry this stupid novelty knife under the Second Amendment. He and his lawyer kept petitioning for the case to be dropped all the way up to the state Supreme Court. In a surprising bout of sanity, the court agreed with the defense. They declared that a switchblade is, when it comes down to it, a pocket knife, which was absolutely commonly carried by our founders as both a utility blade and as a weapon, and therefore covered under the NYSERPA ruling and the Second Amendment. The court cited the fact that, at this time, only 7 states and the District of Columbia still ban switchblades as proof that switchblades are in common use, so they passed that test. The court further states that the state failed to prove that an automatically deploying knife is sufficiently more dangerous than one you must manually deploy. Incidentally, I enjoyed that they threw some shade at the whole dangerous and unusual thing, stating, of course is dangerous, is weapon. Oddly enough, while they struck down the ban on switchblades, they did not touch the ban on stilettos, daggers, and other double-edged knives, even when commenting that the most common edged weapons at the time of the founders were swords and daggers. So, now that we've covered the recent news, as I said, Weer'd wants to exercise his newfound freedom and buy a switchblade, and has asked me for some suggestions. Being the knife geek, I, of course, have some recommendations. There's basically 2 types of switchblades. The first type is where the knife blade swings open like a standard pocket knife. These are great for quick deployment and will have solid lockup. While there are a couple ways that they're deployed, I prefer ones that have a button that you press over things like sliding scales or an access lock style release. I've found that the button lock designs allows you to keep a confident grip on the knife as you deploy it. while I've had access lock style knives literally leap out of my hand while deploying. An inexpensive example of this type is the Boker Kalashnikov. Boker makes several versions of this knife, and Blade HQ is currently selling them from anywhere between $30 and $90, depending on the material used, blade type, and color scheme. Of course, I'll put a couple of my favorites in the show notes, and I highly recommend that Weer'd check them out. For medium range example, I would probably look at the Kershaw Launch series. Well, except for the Launch 8 and 12, which are stilettos and therefore still illegal in Massachusetts. I own a Launch 13 and I regularly carry it as a dressier knife. Currently, it looks like they range from roughly $100 up to a little over $200, depending on model, and have the added bonus of being made in the good old United States. Of course, if you really want to Gucci it up, you can. I really like the looks of the Protech Newport with bronze and green titanium scales that Blade HQ currently has for $525. Of course, I can sense Aaron's heart palpitations now. I guess it's a good thing I didn't mention their Ultimate Custom Runt 5 with hand engraving and a diamond inlay in the button for a mere $2,400. Sorry, Aaron. Anyway, the other type of switchblade is the iconic out the front or OTF knife. This is the one where you hit a button or push a switch and the blade shoots out the front. They come in both single action, where you have to manually pull a slide back to retract the blade and compress the spring, and double action, where you slide a switch one way to deploy it and the other way to retract it. I personally prefer the double action, but beware they are very fidget friendly and wives may get upset with the constant click-clack noises coming from your desk, or so I've been told. Unfortunately, OTF knives tend to be a little more pricey. Really, the only true budget knife that I can really think of under $100 that I can recommend is the little Boker Plus USB. Panya regularly carries one of these little guys in purple and enjoys using it, but the blade length is only 1.7 inches. Really, with a couple exceptions, budget out the front knives start at about $125, with things like the CobraTech CTK1. CobraTech is a pretty small brand that can be difficult to find, but I have a couple of them and I've been happy with the quality of construction. Once you get to the $250 range and up, I'd probably just go with a Microtech. They've been making OTF knives for a long damn time, and they know what they're doing. Of course, especially without the front knives, if you're in Massachusetts, remember to stay away from the dagger-style blades. Now, for Weer'd, I do have some bad news. So, you know how I said the state Supreme Court struck down the ban on possession of switchblades? Yeah, it looks like they didn't strike down the law banning the selling or manufacturing of the things. That would be a different law. Specifically, General Laws Part 4, Title 1, Chapter 269, Section 12. This law bars the sale and manufacture of switchblades and spring-assisted blades, plus just about everything in the carry law I cited above, plus fun things like a bean blower, whatever the hell that is, sword canes, pistol canes, and slingshots. Yes, f***ing slingshots. Massachusetts, the state that has the motto, Ensi petit placidam sub libertate quietum, which translates to, by the sword we seek peace but only under liberty, has a law banning the manufacture of the weapon favored by Dennis the Menace, and robs kids of the joy of launching water balloons using bits of elastic. Liberty my ass. What the flying is wrong with you goddamn state and the heads that run it? Okay. I've been told that I may need to have a drink and a good lie down. I hope this has been informative. More of my thoughts can be found at gunscarstech.com. If you have any questions, comments, or thoughts for future segments, I can be reached at Oddball at gunscarstech.com or on the ACP Facebook group. Also, check out my wife's podcast, Meowcore, about heavy metal, books, and cats. Until next time, Have a good one. And maybe Weer'd will stop asking me for time-sensitive segments and let me get back to my goddamn 3D printer segments. Where's that bottle?
So, having heard the unedited version, I feel like my Southern swears are going to get a workout for this.
I won't lie. I just used the regular bleep file because that was just funny. Also, I mentioned Beetlejuice, and there was, I don't know if they were doing it to keep the rating or all that, but there were a few instances where Beetlejuice swore and it bleeped out the swear in a movie theater, which I thought was also a hilarious choice. So yeah, no, they were just welcomed by the standard FCC bleep for what Oddball got very spicy towards the end. That is what Massachusetts is like, and yes, it is very frustrating.
So it's really a pity that Massachusetts doesn't allow two-sided knives, because I have a very nice knife which was given to me. I'm not going to say by who, because I don't want to put him on the spot, but it's a very expensive knife. It is a SOG Pentagon out the front.
Mm-hmm.
And that's somewhere around $350. And it's really, really nice, but it's double-bladed, so not legal for you. I'm sorry.
Yep. No, it's not. Maybe someday soon, because again, it's dumb. Oh, you can cut on both sides. Oh, the horror. Yeah. And I will note that, legal or not legal, I am going to openly admit, because it's a Supreme Court ruling. It's not a legal change. It is just a ruling on the laws, which is saying that the fact that some of my EDC knives may have been considered switchblades because they were automatic. They were assisted openers, and I did not realize that Massachusetts considered those automatic knives as well. No, I totally carried those like all the time, and yeah, never gotten into any problem. Never did much to conceal them. So yeah, that's the silliness of Massachusetts laws. And Oddball mentioned the slingshots, and I point out the fact that Nerf slingshots are in fact illegal in Massachusetts.
Everything's illegal in Massachusetts.
Yeah, the toy slingshot is illegal in Massachusetts. And furthermore, toy, he mentioned bean blowers. I've always seen that as another term for pea shooters. And that,
yep, I Googled that, and that's what I'm seeing.
And like literally that is a term that's synonymous for ineffective weapon. You know, you hear in action movies, put away that pea shooter and let it go with a man's gun. That's literally saying that it's that your nickel plated sissy pistol is no good. So yeah, I definitely look forward to getting my first automatic knife, because
what are you gonna get?
I have not decided. I have not decided yet. Actually, I'm going down to hang out with David and Oddball and all that. Miles and I are driving down. We're trying to convince Ryan to join us too. So there'll be a live ACP show from Tennessee, and we're gonna stop at Tennessee Knife Works for sure. And I'm gonna drop some coin.
Is this gonna be like a regular episode, or is it going to be like a mag dump?
It'll probably be a round table, and maybe we'll do a mag dump too. I don't know.
I'm just trying to figure out how I get involved if all of the rest of y'all are gathered around a table and I'm not.
Yeah, that I don't know.
You just might have to have a show without me.
Yeah, we'll miss you, Aaron.
Mm-hmm. David talks about the Gun Nutz loading tray, which is a way to load a magazine that requires very little in the way of hand strength.
Hi, and welcome to Gun Lovers and Other Strangers. To take a break from the interviews I recorded at the GOA Goals Expo last month, in this segment I'd like to talk about one of the products I saw and, in fact, actually purchased. As an instructor, I'm always keeping my eyes open for new items that can help my students be safer and more effective. One of the bigger issues for those with less arm and hand strength is loading pistol magazines. While I love my Maglula loaders, they aren't a good fit for everyone. Enter the Bullet Loader Tray, or BLT, by Nutz. The BLT is a silicone tray that comes in a variety of colors. In layout, it has space for 7 individual handgun rounds, as well as a larger space for another magazine, more loose rounds, or other items. It can be used with single or double stack magazines and works with any centerfire pistol cartridge from 32 ACP through 10mm. It is not designed to work with rimfire rounds. MSRP is currently $30. Nutz also offers the BLT XL, which is larger overall and has 10 slots for cartridges, as well as 3 larger spaces for magazines, etc. The current price for this model is $70. In use, cartridges are placed in these slots with the bullet noses nestled at the top of the space. A magazine is held feed lips down and forward with the base tilted back over the first round. The magazine is pressed down on the cartridge, tilted upright, and slid forward. Repeat for the remaining rounds, continue as necessary until the magazine is fully loaded. There is a slight learning curve in positioning the magazine at the optimal angle, but it's a remarkably simple process. This method removes one of the more difficult issues when loading double-stack magazines by hand, the first round. Due to the bevel on the follower, the initial cartridge has to be introduced at an angle from the side. Many new shooters, and not an inconsequential number of experienced ones, find this challenging. The technique used by the BLT avoids this challenge entirely. What it can't remove is each round compressing the magazine spring a bit more, requiring increasing pressure to load each additional cartridge. However, the leverage made available by this system reduces it to manageable levels for most people. Nutz gave away a number of their loading trays for use on the shooting line at Media Range Day, so I got to see them in use and try them myself. Being made of silicone, they are fairly robust, but can eventually be damaged by sharp edges. A small amount of care will see the bullet loading tray last a long time. On a related note, after I got mine, it took about a week before I opened the package. When I did, I saw there were some small cracks on one edge of the tray. I reached out to Nutz and asked if this was normal or something I should be concerned about. After emailing them pictures of the issue, they immediately asked for my mailing address and sent me a replacement tray. Any manufacturing process will occasionally produce imperfect items that may slip past quality control. The important thing is how the company deals with these issues. Nutz handled it very well indeed. For those of our listeners who are, or know, someone who has issues loading pistol magazines, I highly recommend taking a look at the Nutz bullet loading tray. Now, if you'll excuse me, all this talk of BLTs has made me hungry.
True love is the greatest thing in the world. Except for a nice MLT, mutton, lettuce, and tomato sandwich when the mutton is nice and lean and the tomatoes are ripe. They're so perky. I love that.
That about wraps up this segment. If you have any questions for me or suggestions for future segments or a comment on a past segment, please post them on the Assorted Calibers Podcast Facebook or MeWe pages, and Aaron or Weer'd will make sure I see them. I'm also a contributor on the Blue Collar Prepping blog, which can be found at bluecollarprepping.blogspot.com. Finally, I'm a published author, and books with my stories can be found on Amazon under the names Brena, Bock, and David Bock. That's all for now. Thanks for listening. I'm David, and this is Gun Lovers and Other Strangers.
So, like, a few weeks ago, like, I used a mag loader literally for the first time in my life. And it's really because most of my collection is single stack mags, revolvers, or rifles with double feed magazines, which are notoriously easy to load. So I hadn't really had a chance to contemplate it, but looking at this one, it certainly seems like, why wouldn't you just use like a Maglula or something similar? And, but the one thing I will note, that trying to work my way through learning how to use a Maglula, I dropped a ton of rounds as I was trying to do that fast loading. And this one seems to be much better at keeping positive control of the ammo. And you can really essentially do it one-handed. And that's, and that is very nice. And it does appear to supply a lot of leverage.
Well, yeah, it seems to be very good for people who have poor hand strength. So if you have arthritis, this is a good loader for you. I do have to ask, Weer'd, because I have had no problems with my Maglula. So what is causing you to drop rounds? I'm guessing it's the way you're holding the magazine, but I'm not certain.
It's probably that. It's just the how I was doing it is we were at like a sand pit, so it wasn't like I had like a set table, and so I just grabbed a fistful of rounds, and it was also it didn't have a table, so I was wedging the mag base against my body, and then compressing the string, dropping the round in, shoving it in, doing the squeeze pull sort of action.
What part of your body?
My gut.
I think you'll have better luck if you put it right up against your breastbone.
Okay. That was not what I came at, because I kind of wanted to have that like vertical, let gravity work in my favor, but
it definitely have gravity work in your favor, but just put the magazine base plate up against your breastbone and then pull the Maglula towards you while you're pushing down, then just drop the round in and then let the Lula spring out and up.
Okay.
What I do when I load is I like to put the magazine on the table. It's the same basic idea. It's just you put the magazine against a firm surface, and then it's easy for me. But then I don't yet have arthritic hands, so
yeah,
it's a heck of a lot faster. That's the one thing about the gun Nutz. It seems awfully slow, and I wonder why they went with 7 rounds instead of 10. That seems very weird to me, but yeah. If you can't do it a traditional way, then slow but reliable is better than fast but can't. So yeah.
Yep. And also I will say that I was very pleased for David talking about getting a defective unit and calling them up. One time when Jay Grazio of Shooting Illustrated was still living in Massachusetts, and we had He had come to my club because I had a 24-hour range at my club. So if it was late at night and he was up against the deadline, we'd go shooting at my club, and he pulled a Charter Arms revolver out of a box, brand new, still in the shrink wrap, and I'm trying to remember if there was rust on it or if it had damage on the front sight, but the gun was not in a condition that Jay wanted to shoot it and was going to send it back. And I'm like, you should absolutely document what you did to send it back, because as David says, anything that's mass produced will have a few lemons will make their way out of the factory. And just the quality of your company is how few actually make it out. So the fact that, something was wrong and David called him up and they got him a replacement right away. And he didn't mention if he had to send back the defective product, but it's always nice if they let you keep it, because he can then go ahead and use it until it breaks.
Hey, Weer'd, do you know what else doesn't break?
Our listeners, each and every one of them. Thank you all for listening to this show. It really does mean the world to us. But we must give some special thanks to our supporters on Patreon. Speaking of Patreon, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast and sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film track, and the ACP mag dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on both Apple Podcasts and Pocket Casts. Special shout-outs to the 51 listeners who actually rated us. Thank you. We now know that 51 people listen this far into the show.
Yeah,
that's useful data.
I actually didn't check today to see if it had gone up since I last checked. But yeah, the other day we talked about rating on that, but I hadn't actually done it, and I said, I got a few minutes, and I started rating all of the podcasts. Interesting enough, you have to listen to the podcasts, so you have to have been like at least a somewhat regular listener to rate a podcast. So it had been long enough since the update that and Red, Blue, and Brady had not updated in forever. So I was not able to give them the 1 star that they deserve, and neither had anybody else. So there's certainly that.
Also, please remember to subscribe to us on the platform of your choice. You know which one we recommend. And share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I've got a blog. It's weerdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com. And you can hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And assuming I pull myself out of this funk that I'm in, you can get more from me at linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And thanks to Nate Spencer for our music.
I used a Maglula correctly the very first time I used it, and Weer'd has butterfingers, apparently. Our coordination is Assorted, and so is our podcast. Good night, everyone.
I deserve this. Good night.